Welcome back to Golf Center. One of the most interesting things about watching the U.S. Open this past week was seeing how the players played their shots around the green. They had many different options in how they were going to play those shots. So Chris is here to give us a few tips about how we can play those shots on our golf game.
Typically when you see the pros playing, they miss greens. They definitely are using their wedges, out of bunkers, out of the rough around the greens. But as you saw at the U.S. Open with their turtleback greens and the way that the ball ran off into the closely mown areas, and as you saw, like I said, there was no rough at the U.S. Open. It wasn't always a wedge they were using around the green for the one reason that the ball was sitting so tight, and because of the plays they had to throw the ball up on the different sections of the greens, it made it challenging to make sure that they didn't have any mishits. So, like I said, the wedge, generally the club that you see the pros use around the green, we didn't see it that much, and when we did, you saw a motion out of the guys where you didn't see a lot of divots this weekend. And the reason for that, like I said, was because of the tight lies. So, one of the things I want you to keep in mind when you're out playing and you're playing around the greens and it's very, very firm, you want to make sure that you're not taking big divots with your wedges, because if you're taking a big divot, we know that we're coming down steep into the ball like that, and unless you catch it just right, you're going to have a mishit. The way you need to make sure you're coming into the ball when you're on hard pan is we want to make sure the wedge is coming in very shallow, not very, very steep. A shallower wedge is going to give us a cleaner hit. A cleaner hit's going to have more control. One of the ways you can always tell if you're coming in shallower is when you get to impact. If your shaft is fairly vertical, if you've got a lot of lean to it, there's probably a good chance you're coming down into it steep and there's going to be a mishit. At the Open this past weekend, we saw this club get used a lot, the putter. For the simple reason, Jess, that number one, let's face it, how many times are you going to mishit a putter? I mean, even when we go to Adventure Cove to do putt-putt, we're not going to have that many mishit putts, right?
No.
So with the way that the collection area is kind of funneled down, and because the surface was smooth going up to the greens, the putter was a very viable option, and you saw that out of Martin Keimer a lot on Sunday. I'm sure we're going to see it a lot out of the ladies for the Women's Open. And one of the things we have to keep in mind is if we're going to use the putter around the green, you need to practice using the putter around the green. And that means even when you're at home at your course, don't be afraid to practice using the putter when you're 5, 10, 15 yards off the green based on how firm it is. Because like I said, you're not going to have a mishit. And you'd be surprised if you practice a little bit how good you can become at distance control. Okay? So the putter, a good option around the green. Now, last option I like to see around the green, and this is something that's come into play since they've actually come out as clubs, is the use of the hybrid. Okay? I like to see if people like to use the hybrid for a bump and run around the green. Generally the ones that are 21 to 24 degrees loft, they have a little bit more loft. It helps get the ball up in the air a little bit more. The tough thing about using the hybrid is that the ball tends to really jump off of it. Okay, so if you're going to use the hybrid around the green to hit some bump and runs, once again, this is something you're going to want to practice with because distance control is going to be your biggest challenge there. Now, using the hybrid around the green, the one thing I really want you to keep in mind is when you're using this club, you're going to be using it in a fashion more of a putting stroke. Okay, so basically when you're using the hybrid around the green, put the ball back by your right foot, get your hands a little bit forward, and let the club just softly fall down into it. More like I said, a putting stroke where your hands are a little forward. It's going to get the ball kind of bouncing, get it up on the green, and hopefully stop you from having those mishits, all right? So get out there and practice that a little bit. Jessie, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us this week.
Thank you so much for having me.
We'd like to thank you for watching Golf Center. I'm PGA professional Chris Tremblay. We'll see you next time.